forces you to think not solely for the profit, but for the positive impact that your company is going to have, which at the end of the day is going to generate profit. So I really like that approach.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to Evolving Your Workplace. I'm Carol Schultz. Today's episode, we are going to get into what it is to be a public benefit corporation and why you may consider becoming one. For anyone leading a company or starting a company, this one is for you. I'm joined today by Marion Siboni, founder and CEO of La Crème de la Stem. Marion, thanks so much for joining me today. Can you first tell us a little bit about your company, Crème de la Stem?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Carol, for having me today. I'm really glad to be here. So La Crème de la Stem is a public benefit corporation, as you mentioned. They're specifically designed to support early stage female founders building in tech and science. So I provide weekly sessions with investors to demystify the investing process, VIP guests who can share actionable advice, whether it is exited entrepreneurs, go-to-market experts, social media influencers, and so on. And I also provide perks and discounts from corporate partners.
So can you explain what a public benefit corporation is for those who don't know? The reason I ask is because I, of course, am familiar with other, B Corps and C Corps, but I wasn't familiar with this term. And what then are some of the reasons that a company might take this route instead of the traditional sort of S Corp route?
Yes, absolutely. So a public benefit corporation is a C Corp, but it has two additional requirements than a classic C Corp. First, you have to have a mission statement rooted in the core structure. And second is you have to publish a report every 2 years to share with the public what the progress is that you have done with your company to address that specific mission that you are targeting. So I decided to go for a public benefit corporation because I wanted to be able to incorporate my mission in a really strong structure. I really wanted to make sure that other members understand why I'm doing it and the fact that my number one objective is to act for a public benefit. It is a for-profit, so I am a classic business entity, but I really wanted to integrate those social goals into the corporate structure. I look into the different aspects of all the legal structures like a nonprofit, LLC, classic C Corp. I also look into B Corp, as you're mentioning, but the difference with the B Corp is that B Corp is a private stamp. And so you actually have to pay a private company every year. It's not cheap to show that you are respecting those requirements. So to me, that was also like it just made more sense for it to be directly into the legal structure rather than paying some sort of private company to have a stamp.
Interesting, because I think that like Lemonade is a B Corp, right? If I'm not incorrect, as is maybe Warby Parker and Coursera. I'm not certain about that, but I knew Lemonade was because I've followed them for some time.
Yeah, Patagonia as well is another B Corp, and they also are a public benefit corporation. So they decided to have both. I think B Corp is more like from a marketing standpoint. It's, they did a really good job of sharing this with the public and advertising around this.
Yes. And that's why, Lemonade very, very was, big on telling everybody, here's what we're doing, and this is why, if you want to support a company that's doing good in the world, hey, use us. Right.
Absolutely.
So what was it for you personally that had you say, yeah, public benefit corps, that C Corp with those qualifiers, right? Instead of going the traditional route. Like, what is that going to do for not just your business, but any business, for example, that chooses that route?
Yeah, so when you choose to be a public benefit corporation, you are legally required to consider the impact of your decision on a large range of stakeholders. So whether it's like employees, customers, communities, partners, and so on. So that was really important for me to have that. And I think this is important in general to just have that as a core component, because then it forces you to think not solely for the profit, but for the positive impact that your company is going to have, which at the end of the day is going to generate profit.
Right.
So I really like that approach.
And a positive impact to the employees, to the planet, to consumers, all of the above, some of the above.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's really the goal. It's like you decide to put that into your consideration, depending whatever decision you make, he has to address those goals. So that's something I was doing no matter what intuitively. So I think it would just make sense to align that with a legal standpoint.
You know, I have to wonder if in running a public benefit corp, and I'm not asking what you're personally going to do, it sort of leads me to believe that a public benefit corp is not one that's going to go public. Because the minute it goes public, the goals and objectives change, because now you have to bow to Wall Street and what they want,
Mm-hmm.
and to shareholders, right? Which
Yes.
I have to imagine a privately held public benefit corporation does not have to do that. Now, that doesn't negate the fact that maybe somebody will come along and buy that public benefit corporation
Mm.
and turn it into not being a public benefit corporation any longer. So, you know, I think a lot about this because of I don't want to say the evils of Wall Street, because as somebody who owns equities myself, right,
Yeah.
I have to look at what I'm invested in. And some of those things were things that I inherited, right, from my parents, to say, you know, this is not a company I want to do business with. You right?
Yes.
I mean, I think I had the minute I got it, I had my broker sell everything in Philip Morris.
Mm.
I said, why am I invested in a company who's killing people with their products?
Yes.
Or the pharmaceutical companies, which are doing
Yeah.
much the same. For entrepreneurs listening, what advice can you give on if they're grappling with this? Gosh, should I be a public benefit? Should I be a regular C Corp? Like what? You know, I mean, I look at some of the horrible, evil companies out there making billions of dollars, and I'm thinking, what are they really doing to help anybody?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a firm believer that if you do good at some point, it's gonna pay
Yep.
forward. So I also think that when you think on a global standpoint, like a 360 standpoint, and you think not just about like purely profit, which can be good for the short term, but you think more on the long term, and you know, building an ecosystem of partners who are supporting you, of customers who understand why you're doing that, then it just pays on the long term. So I
Yeah.
think this is a smart long-term approach. I think it forces you to be very careful and be very strategic about the type of partner that you will pick, and even the type of customers that you want to have. And it's going to pay at some point, right? I think that it's all about building strong foundations, and then also just being coherent and aligned with your values and being able to share that.
Mhm.
So that's also like a marketing argument to be a public benefit corporation. And actually, one of the founding members of La Crème de la STEM, she came to one of the webinars I was doing with the NASDAQ, and then she came on my website and she looked at public benefit corporation. She was not familiar with that word,
Mhm.
but she told me that what clicked for me. She said that's what made a difference, and this is why I wanted to be part of your community, because I know you're gonna do it for the greater good rather than for pure profitable standpoint.
Right.
Again, at the end of the day, we're in a capitalistic world, and
Right.
it is a for-profit, but
Yeah.
I believe you can do both.
Well, and as do I. And I think that's what's really important here, right? It's, you know, just because you're a for-profit company doesn't mean you have to be evil.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that when we look at the founders that are developing these public benefits corporations, what I have to wonder is it mostly in the, you know, millennial and Gen Zs, right? The
Yeah.
younger people who, you know, are caught in a world of someone else's making that they're not necessarily happy with.
Yes.
How can I make a difference?
Yes,
Right.
for sure.
And what does that look like for me to make a difference?
Yes. I think there is a need for purpose that we see in, I think, all generation. I mean, we see it as a trend. Like, I'm a millennial. I see that in like a lot of millennials are, you know, trying to find a job that makes sense or build a company that makes sense. We see that in Gen Z as well. But I think this is like a global movement of, at the end of the day, you don't want to be just part of a system. You want to make sure that you can contribute, specifically in a world where we have like a lot of uncertainty, coming out of the pandemic, going in a world where politically the world is quite unstable at the moment. It's important to stay grounded and make sure that you can
Yeah.
look beyond that and
Mhm.
make sure you have a positive impact in your life.
And would you say that that's been one of the driving forces behind those who choose to align themselves with your company?
Yes, absolutely. I think that when you are an entrepreneur, you're driven by a passion. That's something that is, consuming you. It's something that I hear a lot. People like, I can't get rid of that idea. I have to like tap into it. I'm just obsessed with that problem I need to solve. And I think this is like the core component of every entrepreneur is like finding that passion and then being able to go from a passion to an idea to then something that actually works
Mm.
and build a business around that. But at the core of it, there is a passion because being an entrepreneur is so difficult. You need to be so resilient, have so much grit, and believe in your idea and believe in yourself or your passion so much that if you don't have that flame inside you, you're going to last maybe 6 months, maybe a year
Yeah.
top, but you won't be able to stay that long around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I know we had talked like, for your plans for the company. Are you planning on growing it, hiring people, what you think about doing? And, it makes me think of a very old friend of mine who is doing some research now to determine if he wants to build a platform that will be competitive to another platform that we would all know. And part of the problem is with this other platform is it was acquired by a company and they've basically ruined it. Right. And he said to me, Carol, I don't need to, make billions of dollars. I want to have a nice retirement. I want to have a cushy life, whatever that might be. But I don't need billions of dollars to do that.
Yes.
And, I thought that was interesting. And I said, well, I get that. So, as you start building the company, here's what you have to think about is, if I were to come in, let's say as a co-founder with you on this, I know what I need to be able to basically retire with my horses and travel around, buy a ranch somewhere outside of Colorado. And, the amount of money I would need to do that and have that relaxing, retirement. So, and as we start thinking about this, and that's of course where I get into, what's our talent strategy going to be, right? Is, finding people, if you're the one that says, hey, I'm going to build this and I only want to make X amount of money, then, you're probably on your own because if you do at some point bring in full-time employees, they're going to want to know, well, how am I going to make money?
Yes.
Do I need to be a billionaire? No, but I certainly would like to make X million so I could invest or do whatever I want to do with that money, right? Yeah, it's not my job to tell somebody what they should want to do with and how much money they should need. And, I think that those are things that people really need to think about.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I think it's and I feel like we now live in a world where it's not that obvious anymore that
Yeah.
you need to make that much money to be happy. I have like a lot of friends that are very happy with the job they have. They don't want any more responsibilities
Right.
because maybe they're just starting a family. They just,
Mhm.
had a kid and they want to just be able to make the most of the money they've been making over the past few years, right?
Mhm.
There is also this perspective of you have to enjoy right now while you're healthy and you have the means to travel the world and enjoy going out and have some sort of freedom. So I think
Mhm.
the freedom is not always through money. It can be through different ways. And yeah, I like that we see more and more different narratives and there is no one size fits all. And some
Yeah.
people will be happy with, the extensive goal of being a billionaire, which by
Mhm.
the way is not achievable by a lot of people
That's
on
right.
this planet. And
Yeah.
some will be happy to just make a couple of millions and some will be happy with like less. And yeah, I don't think there is like a single way of being happy
Mhm.
in the world today.
Yeah. I agree. I just, it's like I said, it's not for, you or I to you or me to tell people how much money they should want to make, what they need for retirement, whatever that might be.
Hmm.
But that's part of, when thinking about building a company, right? Or,
Yeah.
if you're looking at a public benefit corporation or what my buddy is looking to do is, to have him start thinking about, okay, I know this is what you want to make, but if you're going to have full-time employees, you have to think about what they need and what they want.
Yes.
Right. And, I don't need to build this to, being as big as, this. I say, well, I understand that. And you may not have to do that. But the question then is, how big do you need to build it so people are, do you want people who are happy making $150,000 a year? If you do, that's a totally different profile.
Yeah.
Somebody who's looking to get out of this with millions.
Yes, for sure.
You know,
I think it's about setting the expectation as well and understand what makes sense for those employees.
Mhm.
There are other forms of rewards. Working remotely is one of them. It's something we've seen a lot during the pandemic. We see
Yeah.
so much more companies forcing the return to the office,
Yes.
and there is so many employees that are craving to just have the freedom of travel wherever they want to,
Mhm.
and they will value that more than anything else.
That's right.
So that's a way to attract good employees as well.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. What would you say would be your argument for, if somebody came to you and said, I'm trying to decide what to do, what are the top 3 reasons I should build a public benefit corporation?
I think the number one is having a positive impact on the world.
Mhm.
That's definitely something that
Mhm.
is really important. The second one is you could hesitate between building a nonprofit and a for-profit, and the public benefit corporation is a nice way to have the same values, carrying the same values and the nonprofit,
Mhm.
addressing the same needs that a nonprofit
Mhm.
would address, but was still making money and being also owner of your decision. Because when you have a nonprofit, sometimes it can be sometimes you have to report to directors. The nonprofit doesn't belong to
Right.
you as an individual, so. So that's the second argument. And the third, a public benefit corporation is a C corp. So at the end of the day, you can still go fundraising, you can still talk to investors, and you have a legal structure that is open to welcome investors. So it's not an issue for
Mhm.
any investor to invest.
Yeah, and when I listen to anybody talk about nonprofits, I recently had a prospect in the nonprofit industry, and he's, in my first conversation with him, he said to me, one of the hardest things is I don't have any employees yet. Everybody's a volunteer. So right now, as I start to raise money,
Mm-hmm.
and he said the problem is somebody has said, yeah, I'll do this, and then something else comes up. They're like, sorry, can't make it. And I have found that to be, at least the nonprofits I have been associated with in the past, why I would probably never do it again, right? Is that people don't, in my experience, there are very committed people, and especially in these big nonprofits, right, that we hear about. But some of
Yeah.
these smaller companies, it's really hard to get people who will do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah. It's also difficult to get donors. It's a completely different model where you have a for profit. You can generate profit. When you are a nonprofit, you still can generate profit somehow, but you are much more limited on what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
So it's you have more constraint in terms of creativity, I feel like.
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't covered or talked about that you wanted to talk about?
There was a lot I can talk about.
It's important to this conversation.
Yes. Well, I think we did like a good coverage
Yeah.
of what it means to be a public benefit corporation and what it can bring to entrepreneurs doing it or not.
Good, good. And one final thing, the female founders that are working with you, what kind of companies are they building?
Yes, so I have a lot of members, so it's kind of like all over the place in the tech and science industry.
Mhm.
So whether it's to try to cure cancer or develop an AI helping go-to-market experts
Mhm.
to improve their sales pitch, it's kind of like all over the
Mhm.
place on those different industries within the tech and science buckets. They all are working on something different, and it's so great to be at the forefront of innovation and to see, what the world might look like in 10 years.
And are they building public benefits corporations? Are they building, do you even know this, traditional for profits? What are they up to from that standpoint?
Yeah, so most of them have traditional C corporation. Some of
Mhm.
them are not incorporated yet, so they are looking at the different options, understanding, what it means to be a
Mhm.
C corp, a public benefit corporation, or LLC. Although if you want to fundraise, C Corp is definitely the way to go. But yeah, it's definitely something I share with them, specifically
Good.
the one who are building in like the, sustainability or social impact area.
Yeah. Well, Marion Siboni, founder and CEO of La Crème de la Stem, thanks for being with me. I love what you're up to. And I think it's really important that more people learn about this because we need some change in the world.
Yes, we do. Thanks for having this conversation with me. It was really nice.